for clerk.
Deputy Speaker, I move this bill be now read a second time. Deputy Speaker, the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Amendment, Sustainable Procurement Principles, Bill 2020, would enshrine principles of sustainability in federal government procurement decisions. Indeed, the bill amends the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Act 2013 to create a positive duty for the accountable authority of a Commonwealth entity to procure recycled goods. Importantly, Deputy Speaker, the accountable authority of a Commonwealth entity must ensure that at least 30% of the entity's procurement of goods is of recycled goods. This is not an aspirational target, but a baseline minimum, one to be built on by successively more ambitious targets to help us move towards a circular economy. Deputy Speaker, the bill also introduces mandatory sustainable procurement principles which must be taken into account in making purchasing decisions. Goods and property which can be reused, repaired or recycled should be considered, and goods which themselves contained recycled material should be given preference. Environmental impacts and fair and ethical sourcing practices must also be considered by the decision-maker. This means goods and services which have lower adverse environmental impacts across their entire lifespan and socially responsible supply chains will be given a preference. Deputy Speaker, this bill is necessary because while currently the Commonwealth procurement rules do note a requirement to consider environmental sustainability, they actually provide very little detail, and that which is provided is only as an afterthought in a list of non-financial costs and benefits. Yes, the National Waste Policy does make it clear that government procurement is an essential part of sustainable waste management, but it fails to set clear targets or binding obligations. And yes, all the Environment Ministers did meet last year to update the policy, but they did not set any concrete procurement targets for the public sector. In other words, any progress regarding government procurement is way too slow and out of sync with the first element of the national waste export ban, which is scheduled to begin shortly. Deputy Speaker, the Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association Australia is the peak body for waste management in Australia, and it has consistently called for the federal government to take the lead by committing to the procurement of recycled materials. The association argues that a mandatory 30% target for procurement of recycled goods will assist in the creation of a strong remanufacturing sector and show leadership for state and local governments. In other words, the industry is waiting for the government to act and to lead, and this bill provides a simple first step that can be taken to kickstart the waste material market in Australia. Deputy Speaker, to put the need for this bill in context, Australia creates approximately 70 million tonnes of waste annually, and only about 55% of that is recycled. This is more waste and less recycling than the average for developed countries. And when we drill down into these broad figures, the details are staggering. For instance, that each year we use 3.3 billion plastic bags, 2.6 billion coffee cups, 2.4 billion plastic straws and 1.3 billion plastic bottles, that about 80% of our plastic is destined for landfill, and that about 95% of our household food waste, that's more than 8 million tonnes a year, also ends up in landfill, making us one of the highest per capita food wasters in the world. Remember, Deputy Speaker, glass in landfill can take up to 1 million years to decompose. And then there's the e-waste, which accounts for about 70% of the toxic chemicals in our rubbish dumps. And Deputy Speaker, making matters even worse right now is the finding of the Australia Council of Recycling that the COVID-19 pandemic is adding to the problem because households have increased their waste output by some 10%. No wonder Australia now hosts the largest landfill in the Southern Hemisphere, and this is only set to grow as the waste export ban is implemented. Deputy Speaker, on a positive note though, just about everything can be reused or recycled, thereby saving our resources, reducing dependence on international supply chains and helping to clean up the environment. Why, just 1 tonne of paper recycled saves 13 trees, 26,500 litres of water, 2.5 barrels of oil and 4,100 kilowatt-hours of electricity. Moreover, cardboard in particular can be recycled up to 8 times. Recycled goods have, of course, a wide range of uses. Obviously, paper and cardboard can be recycled and used again in the office, but old timber can also be reused or recycled into any number of engineered construction products. Steel, aluminium and glass can all be recycled, and even tyres can be recycled and used as a form of road gravel or for reprocessing into products as diverse as wastewater treatment filters and soundproofing for walls, all of which obviously reduces the need for new materials and creates an internal market for Australia's waste resources. But, Deputy Speaker, it will take strong and sustained political will to achieve this, which is why the federal government's recent commitment to tackle Australia's recycling crisis is good news. But it's news that will turn out to be just rhetoric unless and until Australian governments develop and apply the detailed policies and spend the big money needed to help create the reprocessing and remanufacturing infrastructure required. Deputy Speaker, it will also take the creation of markets for recycled goods if Australia's recycling crisis is to be addressed, because to create a genuinely circular economy, Australia needs to have, or to create, the markets for the recovered materials. Only then will we be positioned to sustainably collect, recycle and reuse the country's waste. In other words, to close the loop. Deputy Speaker, the waste and resource recovery industry has repeatedly noted that the waste export ban should be seen as an opportunity to create genuine Australian markets for Australian recycled materials. In other words, the current Australian waste crisis is an economic opportunity for effective and long-term industry reform. And any new industry will undeniably create new employment opportunities, which is particularly important at the moment, seeing how Australia is in an economic and financial hole, and that we must look at environmentally sustainable opportunities to create employment. Deputy Speaker, to that end, this bill capitalises on the government's purchasing power to create a big new market for sustainable products and drive the shift to a circular economy, because the influential purchasing power of the federal government will encourage greater certainty in the remanufacturing market and drive demand for recovered resources. Deputy Speaker, I now invite the member for Melbourne to speak to the bill, which he's seconding, in my remaining time.